And now, here is the big question of the day. Is a reform landslide looking inevitable at the next general election? Well, of course, that is a long way to go yet. But with their widespread success in last week's elections, YouGov are now predicting Nigel Farage's outfit would continue to benefit from Labour's high disapproval ratings. A new poll out says they'd have a comfortable majority in the House of Commons at the next election. Loads of data to take in, and joining me now to discuss it in the studio is GB News' political correspondent Catherine Forster and also our senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Catherine, 3 polls, one day, one in Westminster, one in Holyrood, one in Wales. Let's start with the eye-popping one, the Westminster polling. Reform's highest ever polling, of course, coming very quick on the heels of last Thursday's elections. You'd expect there to be a high watermark, but the numbers are astonishing. Talk us through them.
It's absolutely mind-blowing. You sort of feel like we've fallen through the looking glass here. So this is a YouGov poll. It puts Reform on 369 seats, up 364 seats. Second, the Lib Dems on 87, Labour on just 86, down
Labour in third
325. The Conservatives, get this, just on 17 seats. Now, I think, of course, it's just a poll, 4 years till the next election, etc., etc. But also in the Senate, and of course we've got Welsh elections next year. Reform looking like being jointly the biggest party, along with Plaid, and in Scotland, Reform in second position. Quite incredible numbers, and it does feel, who knows, but like something massive is shifting in politics.
And the real secondary story, if you like, the supporting actor in this story, Nigel Nelson, is this spectacular collapse of the Labour Party. North, south, east, west. In Wales, the Labour Party simply going to almost nothing. 24 seats down in the Senedd, down to a mere 3. In Westminster, the Labour Party in third position on 86 seats, 325, losing, battered the Conservatives into 5th place. The SNP back from the dead. They were on life support when Nicola Sturgeon was booted out, but they'll be the lead party in Scotland, but the Reform Party in second place. Even people in Scotland who support Reform can't believe these numbers. Now, let's have that caveat again. This is on the huge tailwind of last Thursday, but the polling has been consistent. That word, momentum, seems to be happening.
Yes, I mean, there's no question about it. Reform are on a roll. And if this was repeated at a general election, you're looking at an overall majority of 40 or 50 MPs, which means that they'd have no trouble running the country. They could have a few rebellions and still be able to carry any vote that came through. So, yes, in the event that we were on the eve of an election, this would be absolutely sensational. As you've pointed out, we're not. And I think you have to actually look at a couple of things here. One is Reform have actually got to run something now. They've got 10 councils, 2 mayoralties, and they've got to prove that they can make those things work. The second thing is just the electoral cycle, that if you look at the nearest comparison we've got is the SDP back in the 1980s. They won the Crosby by-election in 1981 by 5,000 votes. This was when the Labour vote collapsed. So a 40% Labour vote went down to below 10%. Following year, they picked up 1,850 councillors, so 3 times more than Reform are doing at the moment. Bigger election, in fairness. 6 years later, they've been swallowed up by the Liberals. So an awful lot can actually change in those few years. But yes, I mean, Reform have certainly is the one political party with the momentum at the moment.
OK, Catherine, Nigel, stick with us because I'd like to get some more analysis now by speaking with the political research director at Savanta, and that is Chris Hopkins. Chris, welcome to the show. You were sat in GB News on election night going through some of the unbelievable data. This is just a poll. It's just 3 polls, but the momentum, the direction of travel, Chris, seems to be consistent. And when we're getting situations such as Reform being in second place in Scotland, pushing the Labour Party into the deepest recesses of Cardiff in Wales, it does feel like something's in the air.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we are. I mean, we saw it on Thursday night, as you say, Martin. When I was in that studio, we are experiencing a realignment of British politics. We are, entering what feels like a truly sort of multi-party phase of British politics, and that is pretty unprecedented. I wasn't old enough to remember some of the things that Nigel was just discussing, but he's right. I think that there isn't a lot of historical precedent for this sort of thing. Yes, it is just one poll, just three polls in three separate geographies, but the direction of travel is apparent, and I think what we are starting to see, especially with the advent now of multi-party politics, is that where first past the post was once a massive thorn in Reform UK's side, it was always going to be a huge have a huge limitation on the number of MPs that they could end up getting. If the Conservative Party and the Labour Party fail to recover in the way that they are, Reform don't need massive numbers in order to return a majority. And I think that's what some of the seat modelling that is off the back of some of these polls is implying.
And Chris Hopkins, proportional representation is always fancied by the smaller parties until they win first past the post. Nobody in power is going to bring that in. Why would a turkey vote for Christmas? I digress. Let's get back to some of these numbers. What's consistent here is the fact that we are now seeing the red wall, the coastal areas, the east, the rump of all that side of the country going turquoise. The Labour Party have been driven back into inner cities, almost retreating to the fortresses of London, Liverpool, Manchester and the northern towns. The Conservatives just been flung up north, flung down south, the Liberal Democrats becoming the party of the southwest. Forget about the north-south divide. We're seeing a political divide, a divide that many, Chris, might say is typified by the left-behind, forgotten parts of Britain, Brexit land, those who've been overlooked for so long. They were ignored during Brexit, and I think that Reform has filled that void. They were ignored in 2016, and now they're roaring. But can this be sustained? Will the Labour Party, will the Tories do everything they can to stop Reform succeeding, for example, in councils, in town halls?
I mean, potentially. I mean, there's so many points there, Martin, to cover. I mean, I think as I say, and as you point out, Reform's support, especially last year in the general election, was relatively evenly spread, and that was always going to be a massive limitation for them under first past the post until we see the collapse that we've seen from the Labour Party and the serious lack of recovery from the Conservative Party. And all of a sudden, if these numbers do sustain the next 3.5 years until the next general election, first past the post will indeed become Reform UK's friend. And I don't really feel, if that is sustained, there's nowhere that Reform can't win, because their support is relatively evenly spread across the country. In many respects, they've sort of taken the Liberal Democrats' age-old problem and solved it in some respects just by polling better. They're not going to have to fight really concentrated constituency battles at a general election. They can fight on all fronts, and indeed, maybe they'll have limited success in really ultra metropolitan areas such as London. But I live in Liverpool. I think that Reform are going to be the obvious second choice here, because the Conservatives are such a toxic brand, and the Labour Party potentially nationally are going to become increasingly unpopular. So really there are going to be very few frontiers where Reform UK can't at least make some inroads, become a real political force, and potentially even cause significant upsets.
Chris Hopkins, excellent analysis as ever, and thank you again for your superb coverage throughout the night on Thursday. And that's the Political Research Director at Savanta, Chris Hopkins. Thank you very much. A quick blast back here in the studio. It's also worth pointing out, Catherine, that other parties, as I said, are doing well in these polls as well. The Liberal Democrats surging ahead, again picking up disaffected Conservatives. The SNP, as I said, back from the dead. The Greens doing well. It just seems anybody but the main two parties, not just Farage's outfit.
Yes, I completely agree. The Lib Dems had a good night last Thursday, Friday. So did the Greens. And it seems that, of course, voters were furious with the Conservatives after 14 years. They went to Labour thinking they were the change, thinking things will be better. OK, still 4 years to go, but no sign of that as yet. And now they're turning on Labour too. And they're looking around and thinking, well, who haven't we tried? Oh, Nigel Farage, he makes sense. He talks in a way that I can understand. Of course, it's easy to shout from the sidelines, Reform are going to have to try to deliver some of what they've promised in these councils.
Nigel, how does Sir Keir Starmer deal with this? If he tacks too far to the right, and we're seeing actually there's new laws today about the Winston Churchill statue, Yvette Cooper clamping down on visa application from Pakistan, Sri Lanka. We're seeing tastes of a drift to the right, but that will upset those on the political left. How does Keir Starmer deal with his Nigel nightmare?
Don't think that he will actually change very much. I mean, what he's said is he wants to go further and faster. But you've got to bear in mind that Keir Starmer is bound by an election manifesto. The election manifesto led to the plan for change. Within the plan for change, there's no leeway for a change of plan.
Well, they've changed a lot. They're going down the pan.
Well, what they're doing... yeah, that wasn't planned.
They've done a lot of things that were not in that manifesto, Nigel.
Well, that's true. They've added bits onto it, but so far they haven't actually broken any of the promises from it.
The winter fuel allowance, they said they wouldn't do in opposition, and they chopped it immediately.
Yes, it wasn't in the manifesto.
That's the biggest thing that's been mentioned on the doorstep.
And I think winter fuel allowance is turning into the Labour poll tax. So at the moment, Keir Starmer is saying absolutely not. We're not going to change it. I think they're going to have to do something. What I hope they do is tax it so richer pensioners pay a substantial amount of it back.
So Keir Starmer has more positions on most things than the Kama Sutra. He'll change his mind on the winter fuel allowance again, surely, if it means the evisceration of his party. But isn't that the point? Can we believe anything he says?
Well, first of all, you've got to find another way of raising the £1.5 billion that the winter fuel allowance is giving the Treasury.
Don't give it to train drivers. Don't give it to foreign carbon capture.
First
of all, give it to Somalia.
Train drivers are not in the equation. I mean, at the moment, they are being nationalised, but at the moment, they're private companies. So we can't really sort of look there. The point about winter fuel allowance is if you can, the intention is to stop rich people who don't need it and spend it on crates of wine or something like that.
They've ruled out means testing, and it's trapped everybody in the mesh.
Yeah. So the answer is if you roll it into the basic state pension, then you tax it. What you would see is a richer pensioner giving back a couple of £100.
Okay. Well, as we say, a long way to go, but fascinating analysis. Thank you both, Catherine and Nigel.